Yesterday, Frank Turek posted this tweet with a link to a clip from Alyssa Childers, and it is really chilling that it shows the increased radicalization of the syncretizing of fundagelical Christianity, so evangelical conservative fundamentalist Protestantism, and it's melding with the MAGA movement that we all know so well, sadly. And key to that is the use of dehumanizing empty rhetorical terms like woke, Marxist, progressive Christian. You can see the hashtag here for progressive Christianity, socialist. And all of these are terms of art that don't have any clearly defined content except they're meant to stoke fear and in-group bonding with the fundagelical MAGA movement, and to otherize other people who are not part of that movement, to stoke anger and resentment toward them, which of course has always been a hallmark of the MAGA movement. And it's getting so extreme now. You can see the rhetorical violence saturating what this person, Alyssa Childers, has to say here as she otherizes and dehumanizes and raises paranoia about literally 50% of the country. This is war rhetoric. Now, it's rhetorical war rhetoric, but keep in mind, never forget, Donald Trump, his violence has always been part of the MAGA movement. It's been an essential part of the MAGA movement. Back 10 years ago, during the run up to the first election, he was encouraging his followers during rallies to, quote, knock the crap out of people who were not Trump supporters. And so non-Trump supporters who were at his rallies were actually physically assaulted. And he said, I'll pay your legal fees if you hit anybody who's not one of my supporters. He, of course, always talks about the press as the enemy of the people. Since the very beginning, he was talking about locking up his opponents. Lock her up was the chant, of course, 10 years ago. And even now, he is pressuring his Justice Department to lock up his enemies, to charge his enemies, James Comey, Letitia James, John Bolton, and on and on and on, Adam Schiff. And then, of course, he pardoned all of the 1,500 insurrectionists and seditionists from his failed insurrection. So violence has always been an intrinsic part of the MAGA movement. And yet, what these people do is they try to gaslight you, is to say, oh, actually, we're the ones that are being attacked and you're trying to attack us. So you're going to see some of that. I'm going to play the clip now, although I'll warn you, I'm not going to be able to restrain myself from pausing the clip at multiple points in order to offer my own commentary along the way. But to my mind, this just shows how this MAGA post-Christian cult, this syncretizing of the MAGA political movement with fundagelical Christianity is becoming increasingly more extreme and increasingly more dangerous. Okay, let's hear from Alyssa Childers on the state of the culture and the coming culture war.
We all got a
Oh, I'm going to turn up that volume. Okay.
front row seat to the end game of all the, for lack of a better word, wokeness that we've all been fighting against for the past.
Okay, so she says, for lack of a better word, wokeness. What is wokeness actually? They never define it. They never clearly define it because woke just means things that we disagree with. Are wheelchair ramps woke, right? If a building um, installs a wheelchair ramp to improve accessibility, is that woke? I don't know. They don't tell us. Is it woke to approve of interracial marriage? Um, is it woke to raise the minimum wage? What is woke? There's no definition given. All woke is an empty term to otherize and to rally people as to anything we don't like.
Few years. I've seen well-meaning people on social media saying things like, hey, we just need to learn to talk to each other. We just need to all come to the same table, put our differences aside. But as well-meaning as that is, that's actually really not the problem in our culture right now.
Okay, so she really shows her cards here. The idea of sitting down with people you disagree with, Every time I start recording a video, Timbit always insists on getting picked up. And I don't know what it is, but he can sit, look out the window for an hour, and I'm sitting at the computer. The second I start recording something, he's like, I want to get in on this. So my apologies for that. But people like Childers, she says, the problem is not that we're not talking to one another. Don't sit down and talk to one another. It's literally what she is saying here, which is just insane. You know what the central problem is, the big picture umbrella problem. It's not simply the syncretizing of a toxic MAGA political movement, an authoritarian anti-democratic movement with toxic evangelical Christianity. That's not the main problem. The bigger problem is that we are in a culture in which everybody is in their has their own tunnel vision, is in their own silo on social media, and only hears things that they agree with. And because of that, people have lost the ability to talk to one another, to understand what the other has to say and what their perspectives are and why they might hold them. And yes, in fact, the people that Alyssa Childers is criticizing here are 100% right. If you want to begin to make progress, drop the culture of contempt and get out of your silo and begin to talk to one another and understand what their perspectives, motivations, fears, and aspirations are. That's the only way you're going to make progress. She is exactly 100% opposed to that.
I think the biggest problem is that half our country has been totally indoctrinated by the Marxist idea of oppressed versus oppressor.
First of all, Alyssa Childers is not an academic, and she doesn't know the first thing about what Marxism is. But she's learned from others in this syncretized MAGA cult that you just call people you disagree with who are left, you call them Marxist. Of course, this is what Donald Trump models all the time. He refers to Mamdani, the current forerunner to become the next mayor of New York City. He just calls him a communist. He's not a communist. That's complete lie. But that's what you do. You otherize. You call everybody you disagree with Marxist. Of course, this is exactly brings us back to Joseph McCarthy in the early 1950s, when he would call everybody he disagreed with, including leftward Hollywood elites, Marxists. How little has changed in 75 years? It's all the same plan for these authoritarians and their use of rhetoric. And did you hear what she says here? The entire 50% of the population, I mean, half the country, 165 million people are indoctrinated, completely indoctrinated. Whereas I guess 165 million other people are not indoctrinated, right? They can see the truth and the light, but the other half of the population are so indoctrinated that there is no value in talking to them whatsoever. This, of course, ironically, is itself indoctrinational. This is classic propaganda, where you draw these sharp binary distinctions between in-group and out-group, and you say, look, the out-group, they're evil, they are in darkness, they are enslaved, don't talk to them, don't listen to them. You just need to fight them because there's no conversation to be had. That is what she is arguing here. It is extraordinary. And of course, how the lack of critical self introspection that she cannot see the extent to which, unless maybe she can, maybe she does know that she's spreading propaganda here, but it also possible, and I think more likely, because I don't think she's playing three-dimensional chess here. I think she just herself is one of the MAGA minions, and she's just regurgitating all the propaganda that others have taught to her. Either way, she's a bad actor in all of this. And the claim that half the population are just completely indoctrinated and you can't even talk to them is, of course, toxic, absurd, and deeply harmful.
And what they don't realize is the solution to that ideology is not reconciliation, it's not unity, it's not coming to the table to talk. It's actually a theory of conflict. And according to that ideology, the only resolution is revolution, it's violence.
Okay, so she's saying here, don't talk to the Marxists, which is half the American population now. because all they want is violence. And of course, the logic here is insane. There's no logic here. Because even if you assumed 165 million Americans are all indoctrinated with Marxism and only want to perpetuate violence against you, it doesn't follow that none of them are persuadable through conversation to abandon that ideology. So the logic here is just crazy. It just absolutely breaks down. If people really were indoctrinated Marxists who only wanted to perpetuate violence on the poor, beleaguered, beset upon MAGA movement, well, then one way to begin to break through would be through dialogue. It is possible when people have a violent ideology to break through that indoctrination and persuade them to abandon that ideology. So the logic here is just absurd. It's just stupid.
And I think that is ultimately what we're seeing. This is good versus evil. It's tyranny versus freedom. And because
Look at the binary rhetoric here. On the one hand is the MAGA syncretized cult, and that is good and freedom. On the other hand, half the population are Marxists who only want violence, and they are evil and darkness. Can you think of a more baldly indoctrinational and harmful rhetorical framing of conflict and the possibility of dialogue in American society than this? This itself, of course, is the precursor not only to rhetorical violence, but to actual violence. If you say, don't listen to the other because they will not listen to you, they only want to hurt you and harm you and perpetuate violence upon you, that itself becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy for you then to have the moral mandate to exercise preemptive violence against them.
of the cowardice of a lot of our Christian leaders, sadly, people have bought into this in the name of some sort of misguided empathy. And
Okay, so now empathy is bad, empathy is toxic, and if you are teaching to have empathy for people with whom you disagree, that is misguided. You ought to abandon that. That is weak. That is the gospel of the MAGA syncretized cult that Childers is propagating here. Don't talk to the other. They are evil, they are dark, they are violent. The only proper response to them is to withdraw from them and fight back against them.
ultimately, what it brings about is violence. And here's an example I saw this week from a well meaning Christian, but basically saying that when our words
That is from a well-meaning Christian. That is so pandering. I mean, it's like why not say bless their heart?
overstep, when we, insist on our right to say our opinion, we're actually doing violence. And we've been convinced as a culture that words are violence. But think about the end result of that. If words are violence, then violence becomes a justifiable response to words.
First of all, so she gives an example here of a well-meaning Christian, and she doesn't tell you who they are. Again, this is rhetorically another classic example where you don't actually quote people, show what they're saying, and critically engage with it, which is exactly what I'm doing here. Rather, you just say, well, there's this woke, progressive, Marxist Christian that I met this last week. I'm not going to tell you who they are because if I told you who they are, you could go and see what they actually said and then see whether I've accurately represented their views, which of course would make illicit Childers vulnerable to refutation. So instead, you never disclose who this person is. You just pull an imaginary person out of the ether, which can serve as your prop to make whatever rhetorical point you want to make.
And so even well-meaning posts like that are perpetuating this oppressed versus oppressor narrative. And it's really a product of the dripping poison of that worldview. And I think
The, okay, so half the American population are Marxists who are indoctrinated and only want to perpetuate violence, and their whole worldview is dripping poison. Don't talk to them. Um, well, then what do you do? What at the end are you supposed to do with people who are evil, dark, whose entire worldview is poison, Marxist violence. How do you respond to them? Do you take up your cross and let them nail you to it, or do you fight? What do you think she wants the MAGA syncretized fundagelical cult to do in this framing of the cultural conflict that she has presented with progressive Christian Marxist woke whatevers? You fight. Right? And so the whole irony here is there is a cartoon that I have somewhere from when I was a teacher. And so it depicts this person with a cross who's like, of course, you're supposed to carry your cross as a Christian. Instead, they're taking their cross and they're hitting another person and they're saying, "Stop persecuting me." And it was a way, this is an old cartoon, it was like 20 or 30 years old, of how fundagelical Christians have this martyrdom complex that everybody is always attacking them, right? And they need to fight back in order to protect themselves. They're not going to hang on the cross or they're going to hit you with it. And that's exactly what she's doing here. Childers, the irony is, like, she's talking about how, oh, the Marxist propagandists, half of the American population are all indoctrinated in violence and violent, and they won't listen to us. They only want to perpetuate violence against us, so don't listen to them. Again, the only response she is then giving is a moral mandate to exercise violence against that movement. And that is how extreme and dangerous this syncretized MAGA cult has become. It is an essential theological arm of Trump's move within the Republican Party toward an authoritarian form of government. They're providing him here with the pseudo religious justification and framing for to equip the soldiers to indoctrinate MAGA soldiers in order to fight others and undermine democratic institutions.